and welcome to SquishiVision, where this episode features two of my least favourite things. Large bodies of water that you're stuck in with no land in sight, which doesn't really kind of jingle my bell if you know what I say, because I'm aquaphobic and fear of drowning absolutely petrifies me. And seeing limbs snap on screen, I also am really not a big fan of. Both of those things happen this episode. I mean, to be fair, the ocean scenes, or the sea scenes, the sea scenes were pretty fine. Actually, I didn't get particularly triggered by those, but I did not like seeing a leg snap on, especially because it was an ankle, and I have a permanently Sorry, I'm just gonna go on silent. I have a permanently deformed ankle, so the ankle snapping on screen did not want to see that. Thanks, Amazon. But apart from that, I mean, this was a it was an episode. Good job, Harris. Fantastic media analysis there. So yeah, we continue like the multiple threads. We got the Galadriel thread, which pretty much actually sorry, that'll be my chicken. It was pretty much the most inconsequential part of the episode. Essentially, turns out if you literally jump off a ship right at the edge of the world as it is, you got a long way to go to get back to the mainland, and that's pretty much her trip. Pretty much her trip was swimming for a long time. Then she found a ship, and they were like, "Where did you come from?" Because obviously it's the first thing you're gonna ask when a random person disappears in the middle of the sea, and she's like very sus, and they're like very sus, and then a big worm comes and kills most of them, and then it's like her and this other guy who I imagine is going to be a main character going forward. I'm not really giving much information on who he is, and that's pretty much that. I mean, the big sea monster was pretty scary, just because, you know, even on our Earth. Right now, the ocean's just full of complete eldritch abominations. I can't say abomination, even when I'm doing my She-Hulk review. Abominations. So, you know, the idea of that is pretty terrifying. But yeah, that apparently leaves after killing everyone except the main characters, and they just sail for a while. And at one point, Galadriel's like, we should tie ourselves to the heavy pieces of wood, and then when the heavy pieces of wood sink in the water, she's like, oh no, and almost drowns until she's cut loose, and that kind of happens. And then a ship appears, and someone's in the ship, and that's when we end the episode. As for the Harfoots, the Hobbit kind of what do you call adjacent beings in this series, well, they're still full. Well, I mean, there was a part where that guy's leg snapped. His ankle snapped, and I didn't want to watch that, and I'm never going to want to watch that again. And I really hope that I never have to watch like a clip or a montage or a YouTube thing where someone's like, hey, the leg's snapping, and then it snaps, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to see that. So the leg snapped, but apart from the leg snapping, there's this really old man who I can't look at and not see. You know, Matt Smith, when Matt Smith has his like beard. Like, you know, when he's playing the Doctor, and the Doctor's like meant to be he's like, it happens in whatever the sequel to The Impossible Astronaut was. It happens in The Wedding of River Song, where he's like apparently in prison for a while, and he grows a white beard, and then he's got like black hair and whatever. I can't see this guy as looking as anything else but that, so I'm going to call him Matt Smith. So Matt Smith like wakes up, and he shouts a bunch, and there's like a whole bunch of cool visual effects, and Nora Relis looks somehow more wide-eyed than her. I mean, I really love the kind of wide-eyed. I get really distracted by how like wide-eyed all the Harfoots are. Like the way they've made their eyes just seem very the most prominent parts of the body. It's just so distracting, but like in a good way. So they have a moment, and then he faints again, and then they drag him up a hill, and then there's like a slapstick point where they let go of the wheelbarrow to argue, and he goes the way down, and then they catch him and they bring him back, whatever. And then he wakes up the next day, he does the exact same thing, and she's like, ah, and he's like, oh, and then like apparently he doesn't know how to speak, so she's like, my name. From what I thought they were doing sign language, which I mean, it's cool from a representation point of view, and I just didn't know how it worked in the law. But no, she was just saying my name is. I mean, that is sign language for my name is. So she was actually doing sign language. I'm not sure why she thought that would help, but because she didn't at one point think he couldn't hear. But she tries to exchange him his name, and he just mirrors what he's saying, because apparently I guess he doesn't know how language works, and he doesn't know how eating. He just seems very much a blank state, all things considered. But then she feeds him some slugs, and apparently it all goes uphill from there, which I mean isn't a sentence you really hear. He doesn't hear it near then. But yeah, so he eats slugs. He starts like scratching a whole bunch of stuff, and the stick snaps, and then the leg snaps, and I don't know if those are like related. Is it like? Because I hope not, because that just means he might do it again, and I don't want to see more leg snapping. You know what I mean? So yeah, and then later on, he's like telling some fireflies to like, can you go make these constellations for me in the sky? And they do, and there's like these constellations, and then apparently that Nori's like, oh, he's looking for these constellations, and I guess her next step is gonna go steal a book from Lenny Henry that's gonna have all the constellations in. But then all the fireflies die, and it's bad, I guess. I don't know what that's meant to mean. This review is very, very lighthearted. But no, I mean, it was like, I'm curious to know who this guy is and what his intrigue is. I did speculate yesterday that someone probably already knows who he is from Tolkienology. But I just love his whole, like, he gets spooked and the whole, everything just goes crazy around him. I like to love that vibe. So yeah, that's his deal. And that's Nori's deal, and you know, Nori's like, well, we gotta help him because that's just like the nice thing to do, and her friends are like, well, why? And she's like, I just explained it's because it's a nice thing to do to help people. We're gonna go help this person, and so yeah, to help him, or at least I don't know. It's really hard to know if he knows what's going on. If they know what's going on, if anyone really knows what's going on in this show, but it's, I mean, the visuals as we're seeing are good, and nice. I'm sure I'm more engrossed with the way they're shooting the scenes, because you know, I'm a big, if anyone who knows me, which is, I mean no one's watching this video, so it's a moot question, but I'm a big fan of like the whole, you know, minimal use of light and flame kind of effects, dark backgrounds, and it's like highlighting like just the key lights of people's faces and like leaving everything else a bit dark. So I'm more fascinated by the lighting here, and it's shot very, very well. And I think Nori's a very captivating character. Like, just her whole, I think she's really selling this whole half-foot mentality that I'm actually very engaged by, and that's a great thing. And through her, I'm engrossed in this mystery, because I'm like, I have that kind of same degree of like wondrous curiosity into what this mysterious person is, but also this kind of caution about this. But the caution's kind of not winning against the curiosity. The other plot line is the kind of the more horror part, and they definitely led into the horror part here, where they discover like there's like the village has been destroyed, and there's massive kind of holes leading all the way back, and whoever attacked the village is burrowing to the new village. And so I should get the names of the characters up, because I can't remember the names of the characters. Ring of Power. That's the wrong website. That's not Wikipedia. I mean, it might do fine. Around there, So he is like, I'm gonna go and explore tunnels to see what's up. You should go back to your village and investigate. And he goes into the tunnels, which apparently lead back to the village anyway, but for whatever reason he doesn't get there in time. Well, we know why he doesn't get there in time. And yeah, that's pretty like horrifying sequence where he's like going through the tunnels and he sees these crawly hands. And then despite the fact this is exactly what he came down to investigate, he's like, I should probably flee away from whatever that crawly weird hand thing is rather than go face it with my sword and presumably superior elf combat skills. And he kind of flees, and it's a very Alex Rider-esque, well, I say Alex Rider-esque moment. There's a part in the first Alex Rider book, Stormbreaker, where he has to go like diving in a cave into water without knowing if the other side of the water is gonna lead to like oxygen or if he's gonna drown. It's pretty terrifying in the books, and it's slightly less terrifying in the movie. And I've not actually watched the Amazon Prime TV show yet, which I was always meant to do. And he dives in it, and he turns up on the other side, and there's like a blubber thing approaches him, and he's like, aha, well, I'm gonna go stab the thing, and then something from behind grabs him, and that's about it. But it's all very horror-esque. Meanwhile, an orc attacks Bronwyn's place and is like that's quite funny because what's his name, Theo, is like, these damn, and that's actually kind of cool bit of foreshadowing, but he's like, these damn mice scurrying under the floorboards, and he like just goes into town on the floorboards and like just kind of yaks, kind of just cracks at them, and then he looks for the crack being like, mice? And then this orc is like, nah, it's me, orc. And then presumably the time it takes orc to bash his way through the wood, he hides into a small cupboard, and the orc just apparently destroys the rest of the flat except this one obvious cupboard in the wall, and then just decides to leave. But then immediately, well, not immediately, but then Berman comes back and is like, Theo, and it feels like you need to be shushed. There's like an orc like beneath the floor, and then the orc, I assume hears Berman shouting, comes back, and feels like, go get help. And Berman's like, okay, actually no, because you're still here. And apparently it would have, in the time it took me to get from the cupboard to the door, Theo didn't think that he could get from the cupboard to the door, so he stayed behind. And she was like, oh, I guess I gotta stay behind as well. And I don't really understand what happened in that sequence, and it was very contrived to the point where it was almost seemed as if they did that just so they could have both characters in the room rather than them both leaving. And it's unclear why Theo decided, I mean, Theo not leaving makes sense because he would have probably maybe still been scared that the orc was still around, and he didn't think he'd escape in time. But when clearly Bromwell arrived, that would have been his point to be like, let's go. Why? I don't know why he stayed in the cupboard and told her to leave. I mean, I guess that's a natural fear response. It just seems a bit contrived. Anyway, the orc is like, okay, I'm gonna kill Theo in particular. Like, screw Theo. That kid's clearly like problematic. Very like problematic. So yeah, he the orc kind of just tries to attack one or the other, but he keeps getting stabbed, and he's a resilient orc, so he's like just taking all these like stab wounds like it's nothing, and until he gets decapitated. And then Bronwyn takes his head back to the pub. It's like, trying to warn you about these orcs, man. What are you doing? But yeah, no, like there were very few jump scares in that sequence, and it was definitely kind of like leading on a horror element, to a point where, I mean, I had to like kind of pause and like look for a couple of seconds because I don't like a jump scare, so that was fun. But I mean, like, they definitely led in, like, we definitely were like trying to make orcs more scary because obviously the Hobbit made them a bit cartoonish, but even then they were like still scary. And then Lord of the Rings was kind of kept flip-flopping between how much of like a threat they were. But this is like the first time we got like an orc so viscerally portrayed on screen in this kind of context. And then, you know, they were almost like zombie-like. They were wearing kind of like they were like animal skulls, and there was blood on their faces, and it was quite a scary thing. So yeah, that bit happened. It was generally like a lot of action, like horror parts of it. There was a lot of horror, screaming, and it was like these two were barely like surviving against this orc. It was just purely like fighting to survive kind of like stuff. Whatever they kept like stabbing the orc with barely worked. What else have I not seen? And then the fourth part was Elrond trying to like, so Elrond going to Moria and trying to like recruit a dwarven workforce to help with this tower that Cerebon wants to build, and Durin's like, no, you didn't come to my wedding or my wedding or the birth of my children, or when Harris's accent went from Irish to more Scottish for some reason. I guess it's because I'm doing Durin's voice. And I'm gonna just be really like petty about it. And he was definitely very petty about it. So I mean, Aaron plays a diplomatic angle. He first gets his just gets like in there by challenging him to like a rock smashing contest, which he obviously doesn't win. But on the way up, he's like, you know, why are you mad at me, bro? And Durin's like, you think like you didn't say hi for like 20 years? Like that's a long time. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'd be kind of pretty upset if I was cultural for 20 years as well. So. And he's like, oh damn, I'm so sorry, I should so sorry to your family. And Durin's like, yeah, you should fucking sorry to my family. And then he goes to sorry to his family, and his family's like, it's Elrond, and yeah, he gets over it and they have it for dinner. And then he like Durin tells his dad about the plan to like recruit dwarven workforces, and there's like a secret, but we don't get to know what the secret is. It's just gotten over the secret, another secret to be about. So yeah, I mean, the pacing of this episode was much more tighter than the last one, and I definitely kind of was able to follow along more of the more engaged in it. There was no story that I was less engaged in. I think maybe slightly less the orc attack one, just because I didn't. It was horror, and horror's not my genre. But I guess the Galadriel one was actually, I was turned off by the Galadriel one. That's because it wasn't really going anywhere. But again, like I was fascinated by like the set design pieces of the Stranger part, and it was great to see like yeah, that's another thing. It's really great to see like Khazad-dûm in its kind of glory days, rather than in what we see in like The Hobbit and in Lord of the Rings, when it's like when it's abandoned for like loads of years. So that was pretty good. Anyway, doing this accent in what is probably a very offensive attempt at an Irish accent, doing this review rather in a very offensive attempt at an Irish accent, is actually quite exhausting and making me very dizzy and lightheaded because I'm talking so fast and I'm trying to say words, because I can't do an Irish accent slowly. You just can't do. Well, I guess I could do. And I don't know why I just didn't decide to breathe more. That apparently was all I had to do. But I think that's all I had to say, really. And the next episode apparently come out tomorrow, so this is going to be like a 3 for 3. But for then we've got She-Hulk later today, and at some point Lord X. But I also got to edit a video for my degree, so I should probably bounce on that note. So thanks for tuning in, and I guess I'll see you guys later today with a review that won't be me doing it in this accent. Bye.